message just so they can kind of get an idea who's there. We're going to be counting some other things that would be very helpful. There's a lot of speakers that we're going to have today, but we're going to start right off with Dr. Rand Paul is going to be speaking first. So let's welcome Dr. Paul.
You'll have to forgive me, I'm kind of in a bad mood. I had to pay my taxes today and I've been pretty ornery and upset the whole time. About 200 years ago, Sam Adams and a bunch of rabble-rousers, kind of like this crew here, got together and threw some tea in Boston Harbor. They were quite mad about a few things, and Sam Adams famously said, "It doesn't take a majority to prevail, but it takes an irate, tireless minority, keen to set brush fires in the minds of men." And I think we've got a real brush fire going. I never expected to see this big a crowd. This is awesome. This is going on across the country. Hundreds of these. If you watch Keith Olbermann, he says, "Oh, it's just a bunch of stooges for Fox News." Or they say, "Oh, it's just a bunch of shills for the Republican Party." But I'm not out here representing Fox News. I'm not out here representing the Republican Party. I'm out here because I'm unhappy because our government is spending us into oblivion.
Yes.
We need to acknowledge that there's enough blame, and it's bipartisan blame. If you're going to be out here and just say it's all Obama, that's not true. For 8 years, we had Republicans in the White House, and for 6 of those 8 years, the Republicans controlled all 3 branches of government. And the deficit went from $5 trillion to $10 trillion. In the last few months, in the waning months of the Bush administration, Obama and McCain rushed back to Washington to vote the same way, to add another $1 trillion to the deficit. Everybody asks the question, well, was it the right thing or the wrong thing? We don't have the money. We are a bankrupt society, and we're becoming a bankrupt country. Both parties race back to Washington, spend another $1 trillion. Now we've had an intervening election, and people seem to be more motivated, which is good, and now the Republicans are voting unified against another $1 trillion that was the stimulus package that Obama presented. But there's enough blame to go all around. Obama recognizes this because Obama looks at the Republicans and he says, "Who are you to criticize me for spending money when you doubled the deficit?" We need a clean wash. We need new people in Washington.
Amen.
We need people who have believability. Many of the people have gone up there and have lost their way. They've lost the connection with the people. They've lost connection with the tax structure. When we're out here, we're talking a lot about taxes because it's April 15th. We should acknowledge that we are paying more in taxes now than we do for food, clothing, and housing combined. The number one item in your family budget is not your food or your housing or your rent, it's your taxes. That's a mistake. That is something we must change, and we must do something soon, or there will be dire consequences. I used to think, oh, well, this is just something we can be for or against. We are literally spending ourselves into oblivion, and the way they pay for the deficit is they either tax you, or they borrow it, or they print it. And they are printing money by the billions and billions and billions. And what it will mean for you is, within a year, you may be going to the grocery store and your milk may be $8 a gallon, or $10 a gallon, or heaven forbid that it's what happened in the Weimar Republic in Germany when workers got paid twice a day and they took their money in wheelbarrows and it was worthless by the end of the day. We are in danger of becoming a banana republic if we don't do something about runaway spending. And so some people say, well, if it's just about taxes, we're not talking about spending. They're two sides of the same coin. We only have taxes because we have too much spending. Now, some liberal pundits say, what are you complaining about? The colonialists, they complained because they had taxation without representation. Well, I'm here today to tell you that we are taxing the future without representation. We have a deficit that is going to be... We have a deficit that is so large that we will not pay for it in our generation, not our kids' generation. It will be our kids' generation still paying for the profligate ways of our current society. My father's always been a fan of saying, or a proponent of saying, that those who live beyond their means will live beneath their means. I think that is coming. For 40 years we've lost our manufacturing base in this country. We are losing the strengths that we once had as a country because we want the easy way. We want $20,000 on our credit card personally we can't pay. We want $1 trillion of a deficit that we can't pay. The deficit this year will be $1.75 trillion in 1 year. And people say, oh, well, Obama's going to cut it in half in 4 years. Well, if he cuts it in half, it'll still almost be twice what the last Bush deficit was. So how could we all be glad about cutting in half what has been a tripling of the deficit? We have to wake up and do something about it. I personally think you can't convince those who are there. I think you need new people there, and that's the only way. I do think that as long as you have your hands out, though, you can't ask for a tax break. So if you want to cut taxes, we can't have our hands out looking for more handouts. The city of Bowling Green's looking for handouts. Everybody's got their handout. $1 million here, $1 million there. They think the money is free and has no consequences. The money is driving the deficit. The deficit now is bigger than it's ever been as a percentage of the gross national product, bigger even than it was during World War II. We have to do something. I personally say, instead of asking them to bring home the bacon, let's bring home the politicians.
That's right.
Some people have said, well, this is just non-focus. Great, you got a lot of people show up. What are you going to do? You can do something. There are elections. There are candidates. Go out and find a good candidate. Find someone you want to come home and bring home to your neighborhood from Washington and send some new people. Make something constructive come out of this. Get on someone's email list. Get connected with the Tea Party. Get connected with somebody in Kentucky. The people here in this group, if you got together and worked, could easily elect a candidate, local candidate. You've got a state Senate race that'll come up in the next year. You can elect somebody to that. You've got state rep seats you can win. You've got U.S. Congress. You've got U.S. Senate. You can do something. Get connected and go out there and do something. Let's change what we've got before it's too late.